Ramasha, I'm glad you made it.
Shalom.
Welcome back to the Daily Living Jewish Halacha class. We are now going to the laws of making brachos on food. And today we discussed an interesting topic, which is if you start eating in one place and then you move to another place, are you required to make another bracha? Let's stay tuned as we get into that. But before we get to that, let's just go over one or two principles that we've been discussing over the last few weeks as far as brachos. We've spoken about the importance of making a bracha, and then how when you make a bracha, you want to have the food in your hand. And once you make that bracha, then it covers all foods of the same category. You should have them in mind, but even if you didn't, if it's the same type of food and the food was present at the time, or there was a possibility that it would be brought out, then they are all counted in the bracha. We spoke about how you should swallow before you talk. Medicine we spoke about. Yesterday, we spoke about what I just discussed. If you have different foods with all the same bracha, then one bracha covers them all. But if you have different foods with different brachas, then although if accidentally you said a bracha of Bayre Priyadama, thank you Hashem for vegetables, fruits of the ground, and you said it on an apple, so if you did that, then it works, because apples also come from the ground. They come from the tree that comes from the ground. But that's not ideal, because the bracha should be as specified as possible. Therefore, rather make a Bayre Priya 8 on your apple and a Bayre Priyadama on your carrot. Today we discuss what happens if you move to another space. So let's look at the text a little bit inside, and then we'll discuss it outside, and questions will be welcome. So we're on the last 4 halachos of chapter 50 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So if you change places when eating any kind of food except bread, if you change places even though your mind was not distracted from the food, it is considered as though your mind was distracted. Consequently, if you eat or drink in one room and then move to another room in order to conclude eating or drinking there, even if you're continuing to eat the very same type of food, like we said before, even if the food is in your hand, we didn't say that yet. So you make a bracha on a can of Coke and you start drinking it. Not that it's healthy, but that's what you're drinking. And you make a bracha on a can of Coke, and then you get into your car, and then you go to the office and you take your can of Coke with you, and you have another drink in the office. So although you still have the same can of Coke with you, changing places causes your session to expire, and you would need to make another bracha. You wouldn't need to make an after bracha on the first half of the can of Coke that you drank at home before making another bracha on the second can of Coke, because you are still drinking after all, but a second bracha will be required. That is what it says in halacha 13. So let's just discuss that for a moment. What does this mean, and why is it this way? Nowadays, you have online sessions, and when you're not active, if you're on online banking and you're not active for a few minutes, then it says your session will expire in 2 minutes, and then you got to keep going. So we said all the food belongs to Hashem, and when we make a bracha, then we start a new session. We get access. Permission is granted, and we have access to Hashem's food. However, if we finish eating, and then we want to eat again soon, then we need to log in again. We need to make another bracha. We need to once again acknowledge that everything comes from Hashem. Why so many brachas? I mean, everybody wants brachas in their lives. Maybe when people say that, they mean they want parnasa and they want health. But why are we reciting so many brachas? Because our purpose in this world is to reveal Hashem in this world. And as human beings, we could be very self-absorbed. We could be very caught up in what we're doing and lost in ourselves. And especially when it comes to food, like all the jokes about Jews and food. And I imagine that in the other cultures, they probably make it about their groups as well. I think, truth be told, this isn't uniquely a Jewish thing. It's just how the jokes go. But when it comes to food, people get very absorbed in the food. You could kind of get lost in yourself. So by continuously making brachos, you turn eating into a more meaningful experience. You realize I'm not just eating to be a glutton and out of indulgence. I'm eating so that I could have strength to make a difference to the world, to make the world a better place. And for that, we need constant reminders. So I may have made a bracha just a few hours ago, and then maybe that reminded me when I ate that the food is not just about whetting my appetite or making me feel satisfied, but now a few hours down the line, I probably have long forgotten, and I need another reminder how to even make the eating experience a meaningful experience. And so we make lots of brachas. Now, as long as you're in the same eating session, then there would be no need to make another bracha, because you have that conscience. You're conscious of the fact that Hashem runs the world. But once you terminate your session and you start a new session, then you would need to make another bracha. So if you were eating and you said, I'm done eating, and then you decided to eat again 5 minutes later, if you really were done when you said you were done, then you would need to make another bracha, even though you're in the same place and only 5 minutes have passed. But if you honestly were done and then you changed your mind, okay, if you're at like a Shabbos table and you say, oh, I'm so full, I've already had enough, of this chicken. And then they bring out this, fresh lamb. And, okay, I thought I was full. I had enough chicken, but looking at this lamb, how can I deny? You wouldn't need to make another bracha, because as long as you're sitting by the table, you may be full, but in the back of your head, you are still open to eat some more. But if it's a regular weekday meal, there's no halachic difference between the Shabbos and the weekday. But what I mean to say is, if you really, not just saying that I'm full and I don't think I'll eat anymore, but you really definitively say that I have finished eating and you mean it and you'll keep to it, then if you do decide to eat some more, you will need to make another bracha. Hamoitzi, if it's on bread, things are a little bit different. We're not speaking about that now, but that's the general principle, that once you finish eating, you need to make another bracha. Now comes this particular halacha and says that the moment you get up from your place, that means that you're done. And for those of you that have been joining this class for a while, you've already heard from me multiple times that the idea of eating while walking or standing causes a lot of problems. I think I once heard somebody saying that it causes you to have fat feet. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that it's not a good thing to eat and walk. And I've spoken about the different issues involved, and it comes up in many places in halacha. While the Torah doesn't say, it's not one of the 365 prohibitions, thou shalt not eat while you stand. There's no such prohibition, and one is allowed to eat while they're standing. The Torah nevertheless very much encourages a person to only eat while they're sitting for various reasons. And in this context, what we're learning right now is that if you're eating while you're standing or while you're walking, then you cause problems with your brachas. Why? Because the Torah dictates that the moment you leave your place, then it means you're finished eating. And if you're going to eat some more, then you'll need to make another bracha. But if you're busy walking around, so are you finished eating or you're not finished eating? So the halacha says that once you leave your location, it says the room, but nowadays the later commentaries say that if you're in the same house, then it still works. But once you leave the house, then you're done. That automatically terminates the meal, and you would need to make another bracha. So that's another strong reason not to eat while walking or standing, because your brachas will be falling and you won't know, are you included in the bracha? Do you need to make another bracha? Where exactly are you at? So rather have a seat. And before you get up, you're done. Even to our young children, we try to teach them that if they want to go and play, they first need to finish eating. And if they want to get up, they should ask, just get up. And if they want to get up, then we ask them, are you finished eating? And if you're not, first eat, and then don't be eating and doing other things all at the same time. So again, there's no prohibition involved in eating a sandwich on the run, but it does cause complications in many areas, including when it comes to brachos. So I wouldn't recommend it. Practically speaking, let's see the next two halachos to fine-tune this concept. Similarly, if you go outside the house and then return to your former place to finish the meal, you would need to make another bracha. This rule applies only when you have eaten alone or when you have eaten in the company of others and all of them left their places. But if one of the company remained in his place, then when the others returned to resume eating and drinking, they need not repeat the bracha, since they intended to return to the companion who remained and to finish their meal with him. Since one of the company remained there, the status of fixed place was not cancelled, and they all retained their original status, and it is also considered as one meal. This is a very practical halacha. You're in the middle of eating dinner, and then or you're in the middle of eating lunch, and then there is a delivery. And so you answer the bell, and then you go outside to collect the delivery. So you step outside of the house, and you go into your driveway, and you receive the package, and then you go back to continue eating lunch. The moment you've left your place, the moment you've left the house, then it means that you're done eating. Now, in this case, you weren't done eating, but halachically it's considered like the session has expired. Back to my analogy of online banking. Chances are, if you're online banking and you go outside to accept a delivery, then when you come back into the house, you'll probably need to log in again. Even though you're in the middle of a transaction, the very act of stepping outside probably causes your session to expire. And similarly, when it comes to brachos, if you go outside to take a delivery, then when you come back into the house, you will need to make another bracha on the food. Bread is an exception for this, because if you're eating bread, that makes it more of a, you're deeper into the meal, that even if you step outside, it wouldn't terminate it. You wouldn't need to say another habatzi lechem and aretz. But if you're not having bread, rather you're just having a bowl of cereal or a cup of coffee or a bowl of fruit salads, whatever it is, and you step outside, then when you come inside, you will make another bracha on the food. Unless you were eating together with somebody else and that person stayed inside. So if you stepped outside, but your wife or husband remained inside the house, then they keep the session from expiring, just as if you were doing online banking with your spouse and you went outside, she would keep the session from expiring. So if you're having a meal together, then whoever else you're eating the meal with will keep the meal going, so that when you come back into the house, you will not be required to make another bracha. However, if, let's say, your child was just going overseas and you wanted to go outside to see them off, and so you and your spouse both went outside to see them off, if everybody got up from the lunch table and the supper table to say goodbye, then the session will have expired and you will be required to make another bracha. Okay, when you go from one corner of a room to another, no matter how large the room may be, it is not considered a change of place. So today, the authorities have extended this to the same house. Even if you're going from one room to another, or even from downstairs to upstairs, if it's all in the same house, then although the Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't say that. It says the moment you leave the room, you would be required to make another bracha, only if you stayed in the room. But in those days, maybe a room was pretty much a whole house. Nowadays, the authorities, the halachic authorities, have extended it to say that if you did move from one room to another, you started eating in the dining room and then you wanted somebody to clean up, and so you moved over to the kitchen. Since it is still pretty much, open plan or not open plan, pretty much the same space, you would not be required to make another bracha. But that's not ideal. Really, rather what you should do is, before you ask whoever is assisting to clean up, rather finish up where you are and be done, and then move on with your day, rather than get up and move from one place to another in the middle of a meal. So again, if it's, the Shulchan Aruch says if it's in the same room and you're moving from one space to another, let's say you're at the Kiddush, and first you spoke to Jack, and now you got to go speak to John, and you move across and you take your plate and you sit down by another table so you can catch up and find out who's winning, then you would not be required to make another bracha because it's all in the same room. If it's in another building, or if it's from inside to outside, you would be required to make another bracha. If it's in the same house, you wouldn't, but that's not preferable. You should rather stay in the same space. Okay. Now he says no matter how large the room is. So if you're in a wedding and you're in a massive hall that seats 1,000 people, and it's literally a 15-minute walk to go from the one side of the hall to the other, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you're in that same wedding hall, which is one space, then that causes it to be one session, and so you would not be required to make another bracha. Your session would not expire when you got up and you took a 15-minute walk to meet your other friend at the very other end of the banquet, because you are still in one room, and as long as you're in one room, then your eating session does not expire. What about if it's outdoors, right? You're having a kiddush in the garden, or you're having a cocktail parties, having friends over, going golfing together. You're having a beer while you're at it. So if you eat fruit in an orchard, which is fenced in, and you recite the bracha over the fruit of one tree with the intention of eating fruit of other trees also, then you can eat from the other trees even if they are not within your view, for as long as your mind was not distracted, you do not have to repeat the bracha. So based on this, it would seem that if you're having a beer on the golf course, then if that's considered like one big orchard, one big space, then you would not need to make another bracha when you have another sip of your beer and you've just moved on to the next hole, because it's one space and it's fenced in. So it's still considered like one space. So it's as if it's one room. I mean, a golf course sounds like a little bit of a far stretch because golf courses are huge. But he does say an orchard, and orchards are pretty big as well. So it seems like you would not need to make another bracha on the beer if you were still in the middle of drinking and you just needed to move holes. However, if the orchard is not fenced in, and certainly if you go from one orchard to another, the fact that your mind was not distracted is of no avail, and you would be required to repeat the bracha. So if you're going cherry picking and there actually isn't a fence around the orchard, then it's already like there's nothing that combines it into one space. You need to have that fence around to combine it into one space. If there isn't that one fence, then I would say that as long as you don't see, he didn't say this right now, but I would say as long as you don't see, if I remember correctly, the previous place that you were at, you would need to make another bracha. So if you're in like a forest and or an orchard where there is no fence and you're eating a little bit of apples now and you're going to have another apple from another tree, down the road, then if you can no longer see the first spot, then you would be required to make another bracha. That brings us to the end of the laws of blessings on general principles on brachas that you make before eating food, drinking, or